February 21st, 5:30 p.m. And I'd like to go ahead and call this Carson City Airport Authority meeting to order. First on our agenda is to determine if there is a quorum
Chair Pulitz,
present.
Vice Chair Norvell, Treasurer Rogers, Member Golden,
Here.
Member Hamilton, Member Hutter, Member Horton. A quorum is present.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record, Member Hutter will be here in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and proceed without him for the first portion of our agenda, and then we will continue again once he does arrive. Pledge of Allegiance. Corey, would you like to lead us in the pledge tonight? Thank you. Next, I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. Everyone has had a chance, everyone was sent copies of the minutes. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion or discussion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Also move to approve the minutes from the last Airport Authority meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Golden made a motion to,
Second.
and seconded by Member Harlow. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approval of the minutes has been approved. The chairman reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items. Items may be taken out of order. Items may be combined for consideration by the authority. Items may be pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. Members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person or topic. If your item requires extended discussion, please request the chairman to calendar the matter for a future Airport Authority meeting. With that, the public may provide public comment in advance of a meeting by a written submission to the following email address, manager@flycarsoncity.com, for inclusion of reference in the minutes of the meeting. Your public comment must include your full name and address and be submitted via email by not later than 5 p.m. the day before the meeting. The Carson City Airport Authority values your input. Members of the public who wish to provide live public comment may do so during the designated public comments period indicated on the agenda in person. Now with that, next on the agenda is the airport engineer's report. Do we have our airport engineer report? Is someone from the engineers online?
Brian, are you dialed in? Looks like he is.
Okay, Brian, if you're online, can you hear us? We don't hear you. You may check to see if you're muted. And from the engineer's office, I assume that he's all set. Well, hopefully, Brian, you can figure out how to let us hear you. In the meantime, our airport manager might go ahead and begin summarizing what your report would be for.
Do we want to check with Keith and see if there's some reason why the audio is not coming through in this end?
You want to just ask Keith?
He appears to be unmuted.
Brian, we cannot hear you.
All right, I'll go ahead and move forward with presenting the engineer's report.
Okay, airport manager Corey Jenkins will proceed with the report. If Brian, if you can hear us and can talk, just pop in.
All right, so from Wood Rogers, we have 2 items. One of these items is covering the airport capital improvement plan. We have been working closely with the FAA, Wood Rogers, and developing the ASIP. The ASIP draft that we've got right now changed quite a little bit from what the ASIP looked like before. It's moving to a staggered approach to where we have a design project and a construction project each year. The FAA is more likely to fund projects that are designed for construction, and they're also more likely to approve construction for a project that they have previously approved a design portion for. So this new approach, I think, will be really good for the airport, and it'll also make it to where our annual funding numbers are a little bit more level. You know, right now we've received fairly high amount of funding all in 1 year. This will kind of be spread out a little bit more. We're in the process of scheduling the ASIP meeting with the FAA, and that'll probably take place within the next few weeks. Kaufman is also on board with this, and Wood Rogers and Kaufman Associates will be included on the ASIP meeting with the FAA. The second item, plan review services on behalf of the airport. So Wood Rogers has completed a review of the Arrowhead development. This is kind of a unique opportunity. This is the first time we've had our consulting engineer review improvements for a project like this, which is really good for the airport. I think it's going to really help position the projects to be in line with FAA requirements and regulations. Wood Rogers may have had more to elaborate on that, but that's all that I'm going to be able to elaborate on as of right now.
Corey, is anything holding that project up right now?
So with that project, there has been some back and forth communications about the design of the project to assist with future development along Taxiway Bravo. We're still in that process of the back and forth communications about that. I wouldn't say that that's causing significant delays, but it has contributed.
Brian, can you hear us now? Brian.
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Oh, we
Okay,
can hear him
great.
too. All right.
All right, there we go. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and my apologies for not being there in person this evening. It will not be the normal, but yeah. So Corey, I was able to hear your report, so thank you for stepping in there. Yeah, for the record, Brian Martinez-Wallace, Wood Rogers. Nothing to add on the ACIP at this point. We will look for that meeting with the FAA, and then we can provide probably a more detailed update at that point. And then for plan review services, on the Arrowhead development, we were able to identify some comments on behalf of the airport, and we've worked with the engineer of record on their side, on the Arrowhead side, and they have actually just provided us back their revised plan in response to our comments. So we'll continue working with the airport manager and Arrowhead on that.
I have a couple of things to add from Armstrong. Our truck, we've been informed that the dump truck that's a part of the snowplow that we purchased is on the assembly line. According to that timeline, we should receive it around July at the earliest. We'll see what happens with that. Hopefully that's accurate. So there have been a few issues with the building permit for the SRE building that has caused that project to be delayed. There was a communications issue between the engineer and the city that has been resolved, and they're now working together to try to work through the permitting, the findings and the review for the permit application. So hopefully we will get through that and get that project moving. So that's all that I've got.
Anything else, Brian? Okay, if that's
No, nothing on my end.
okay. Well, then, what we're going to do right now is we're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'd like to get our member Hutter into the next agenda items. So, if you don't mind, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll resume in a few minutes. Thank you. from break. Thank you. Okay, agenda item H1 for discussion and possible action. Echo Delta Community Association request for extension of time on construction schedule will be presented by Mr. Jenkins.
Okay, so Echo Delta Community Association, they have just recently completed the first building as a part of their development. Their tenants are moving in, and they experienced quite a bit of delays during that process. They originally got approved for their lease in June of 2021, so it took them about 32 months to complete that first building. The lease allows for 12 months to submit for permits, and then an additional 12 months to complete construction. This first building was only a part of the project. They had a second building planned, and they do want to proceed with building that second building. Their request is for what's detailed in the motion is for 18 months for an initial extension, then submit for permits following 120 days, then a extension of 30 months to complete construction. That is about in line with their original timeline for the first building, but that is much longer than what would normally be allowed for in a ground lease for construction. I do have an alternate motion in this memo, which is to approve it for 12 months for permits and 24 months to complete construction, which would be more in line with the ground lease. Although I do think that their request is reflective of their experience with their first building, and I don't think it's unreasonable. And I'm available for any questions.
Anybody would like to discuss this item before we vote for anything? Who'd like to discuss this item?
Do you want a motion first, or do you want discussion first?
Well, since we have a potential second motion, I thought we might want to discuss first, and then we'll go.
Sure, if I may. Question for Corey. In the first phase of their project, do you happen to know what the timeline between their submittal of plans to City of Carson City and their receipt of a permit, what that span of time was?
I'm not sure of what the span of time was, but it was a contributing factor to the delays. The two primary factors were lead times on materials and then the delays with permit requests.
So the reason I asked that question is that in the proposed motion, there's a span of construction of 30 months following approved permit. And I suppose that if that's separating out the span of time between the permit approval and the construction, completion of construction, that feels very long to me. And I think there were probably some things in the previous phase, maybe still accounting to the kind of supply chain disruption tail, things like that, that might have been exacerbating construction span of the last phase that may be less relevant today. So I think my comment maybe just also on the permitting side is in that motion item or subpart B says a site permit obtained for construction within 120 days following the submittal of plans. I would suggest that maybe that is sporty in today's environment and maybe impractical on the short side. But maybe that's my editorial. So I think maybe my key point here is just to note that maybe the 30-month span as proposed is unnecessarily long.
One thing I'll say in response to that is I think that the board can choose to amend this motion however the board chooses. You don't have to accept either one of my recommendations. So I think that's all I have to add for that.
Any other discussion?
Tim, question for you, Corey. Um, does the applicant, the lessee, do they have plans already drawn?
They don't have engineer plans. All we have is what was originally submitted,
Mhm.
which was a continuation of the original design going all the way back. Which, Steve, you might be able to comment on who that original developer was. The building that was on those original plans was fairly large in comparison to what they more recently built. That may be one of the contributing factors to their request for more time, because it is a pretty large building, and it had multiple hangars coming off of it. So it ended up being like 3 or 4 hangars total, with one really large one in the middle. And that's all we have. And there's no indication that Echo Delta Community Association wants to build that structure. I don't have any information if that's their plan or if they're going to submit plans for something different.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just
Mr.
to
Takis.
add, Steve Takis, Airport Council, just to add on to that. Yeah, those original plans were the De Loretto plans when it was originally just one large project. Some of the other delays that he had, only because I got involved in some of them to try and rectify some of them, were the utility location that De Loretto had shown earlier on that spot was not correct. It was not precisely where it was. And then when Ortiz went in to try and connect up to utilities, the power company said, well, we don't have an easement for this area, so we aren't doing anything until we get that straightened out. And then it took the power company a little while to come to an agreement as to where the easement would be and how large it would be. They had to come out and identify the precise location of the utilities. Now, I'm thinking those kinds of delays should not be repeatable delays, but that was part of the problem. And I would expect him to change I don't know if I'd expect him to, but I think it's reasonable to expect that he may change the layout of the hangars from what De Loretto projected, 15 years ago or however long it was. I would assume that he's going to build hangars that fit better the market, the current hangar market, not something that would have fit it 15 years ago. I don't know.
Any other comments?
I have one other comment. First one was a question. Something dawned on me. And again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to this. I think that we need to, as the lessor and as the airport authority here, really take into consideration all of the facts involved. Big part of the delay on the first phase of this project was getting utilities over to the site, electrical in particular, as I recall. That has been resolved. So the second phase shouldn't have those sort of problems. You have utilities now on site. That makes a big difference in the development process.
Anybody else?
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I was on the airport authority at the beginning of this lease with Patrick Dang and Airport Structures. And it was a mess. A lot of problems. Mr. De Loretto got involved as a result of involvement of family members. And that's one of the reasons that first set of hangars originally got built. And I think the current developer has been faithful in trying to take up that project and complete it. And I would just suggest that we take that into consideration. And they have tenants moving in, you said?
in the first building that was completed. Their tenants are moving in. Yep.
But there's a long history on that leasehold. And back about the time that the economy went south and nobody was interested in, buying hangars, and everything kind of ground to a stop.
I should add, he does have ads running in Trade-A-Plane, so apparently he still has some hangars that are available. One hangar, okay, that's available. The other thing too is you just take your best shot at what you think's reasonable. There's nothing to prevent him from coming back to you later to show you some other compelling reasons why he needs additional time. It's unfortunate he's not here now, because I'm sure he could give you the blow-by-blow of what it took to get that first set done. I know he was on the phone a lot with Corey and calling me a lot as well. And we always try to do our best to try and shepherd him through. But I have to say, the lawyers in our firm that are doing a lot of the construction law work say that there's a ton of construction that is running behind everywhere in the state. And part of it is supply, part of it's labor, but part of it is also it's becoming harder and harder to get the governmental approvals, to get the building permits and get that stuff out. One of the large developers, large commercial developers that I know personally was complaining that it's gotten so bad on some projects that he ends up losing money on the project, which is something no developer goes in with the plan to do. And he's a good quality developer. So I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that it takes longer to get governmental approvals and permits.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering if Curtis had any thoughts or advice on these two timeframes.
Well, I think what Steve said is on point, in dealing with contractors and talking to people in the community. It does take a little longer. We're not overstaffed at the building department, and they do their very best to get things out. But there are a lot of projects to go through, a lot of things to do. So there are time restraints that come up. So I can understand why it might take a little bit longer to get that paperwork through the process. So I wouldn't dispute that. I'm not familiar with the project, so I don't know if these timeframes would be reasonable or not, quite honestly, but I don't know that they'd be unreasonable either. Yeah.
Anybody else? If not, I have a short comment. Going back to Mr. Ortiz's development, I'm pretty much aware of the biggest delays. He used the same contractor for this project that I've used for my projects up in Reno. Number one, this particular project wasn't delayed because of supply. As a matter of fact, the building was delivered over a year before they even put it up. It was sitting on the site, just building rust. What really the causes that really got him behind was primarily permitting for utilities, city as well, and then we had the worst winter we've had in 50 years for snow. And right when they were ready to go again, the snow came in and just shut them down, forced them to redo all the footings again and it was a mess. So I think he's very sensitive to our time frame. And in this case, I hate to just start, as Mr. Gold and I were discussing earlier, about setting precedent that anybody can have all the time they want in the world to do something. But in this case, due to a specific track record on this particular parcel, I'm okay with this particular request at this time. I don't want to make it a precedent for future projects, but it seems to me because of their history on this one, I would probably tend to go ahead with it, but that's my feelings. Anything else? Okay, we don't have any public to make comments. Members have made discussion. Can I call on a member to make a motion?
I will make a motion. And just as a preview, this will deviate from the proposed motion. But I move to approve the request for extension of time on the construction schedule with Section A reading, plans completed and submitted to the landlord for approval within 12 months of this extension. That Part B read that the site permit be obtained for construction within 180 days next following. And then that Part C would read that construction to be completed within 30 months of the approved permit.
Any comment on Mr. Hutter's motion? If not,
I'll second that motion.
then we have a second. All those in favor? Oh, more discussion again, yeah, after a second. Any other discussion now that we have a second? With no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
I
Opposed? Motion passes. Motion carries. Okay, agenda item H2. For discussion and review, fiscal year 24-25 preliminary budget. This will be presented by Mr. Jenkins.
Okay, so first of all, this item is a non-action item. So this is just a presentation of the first draft of the preliminary budget. So y'all have the budget in your board packets, so I'm sure that y'all have reviewed it. I'm gonna not go through it line by line, but I'll cover some of these items that kind of stand out. Under land leases, we do expect to have a pretty high probability of getting at least one additional ground lease over the next fiscal year. And that's in the College Parkway frontage area. I don't want to disclose any more information about that, but potential developers making progress moving towards that. There are potentials for other ground leases as well, but that's the one that looks most promising to actually be completed in the next fiscal year. There's not going to be Reno air races, so we do expect to have a reduction in tie-down fees. Overall, we do expect an increase in traffic, which would increase our jet fuel tax slightly. Reimbursements. So reimbursements are higher because of the reimbursement agreement that we've established with Carson Tahoe Executive, and that also plays into the legal budget expense later on. So under expenses, we would like for Rick and Cody to be able to join the SWAI Association to have more training and education opportunities available to airport operations staff. So that shows a slight increase in dues. With the additional staff being brought on at the airport, we would like to revamp the airport's communications. So we have a slight increase for phone and internet expenses there. The electricity expenses we expect to go up with the completion of the SRE building and the new PAPI being installed on the airfield. And again, you can see the legal expense item there. Much of that will likely be offset by that reimbursement agreement. The audit, we do expect to perform a single audit. So the audit expense will be higher than it has been previously. And that's because of the high level of federal funding that we've received. We'll see a reduction in some of our expenses due to the additional staff at the airport. So we'll see a reduction in our bookkeeping costs and also our contract labor for administrative assistance. The tractor has been paid off in full, so we'll no longer see an expense for that. The labor expense items are increasing due to the additional staff and the estimated annual raises for existing staff. Now down at the bottom here, we see that we have some airport-funded capital improvement projects listed. I expect to have both the airport capital improvement plan for federal projects and for airport-funded projects at the next board meeting, but you can kind of get a summary of what that's going to look like here. One thing that we came across with the front entrance beautification project is that the project is going to be far more expensive than what was originally anticipated. And also it does require engineering plans because of the pavement work that needs to get done. So what I've done here is I've reduced that budget item to cover the cost of design. So I'll separate out a design project and a construction project for that. By completing the design project, we would have an actual accurate idea of what those costs will be. The assumption before we know is way off, but we don't really know exactly by how much. We need that design project to be completed to have a better idea of what that project's actually going to cost. Also, you see an item on here for rebuild perimeter road design. So this is the result of coring that we had done on our perimeter road to try to determine what the weight limits of that road are. We do have a result of that project, but I need more clarification on what those results actually mean for weight capacities for the fuel trucks. But the main component of their finding is that the road needs to be reconstructed. And they recommend a full reconstruction of the perimeter road. So I've added this rebuild perimeter road design project to determine what that's going to take to rebuild it. I think a part of that design project should be ensuring that the road is built to a standard to accommodate the fuel needs of our fuel providers on the airport. So both of those projects are design projects. And that's all that I have for this item. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions or comments?
Corey, in your discussion of splitting the terminal entrance beautification, I see in the proposed budget 80,000 out of the 120,000. Where is the other part?
So that would be a future project.
Got
and
it.
we won't know the budget for that until the design portion is complete. So we would complete this so that we can figure out what is it going to actually take.
So does the 80,000 represent design?
Yes.
Gotcha. And so previously the 120,000 represented
The
just
entire,
just construction, or was there a smaller portion of design than the 80?
the 120,000 originally was for the complete project, including design and construction. And we found out very quickly that that was not a realistic budget for that project.
Gotcha.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, question for the perimeter road project. I mean, are we planning on, we've been running fuel trucks on that road a long time. Are we going to be increasing our, the size of our fuel trucks on the perimeter road? Is that part of, I mean, it's been doing good so far. So how would we, or how's that work?
So right now we have kind of an informal limit of 2,000 gallons in the fuel trucks when they're operating on that road, because we don't know what the limit actually is. But we do know that the road's deteriorating fairly quickly. So the actual original goal of this project was to say, what is the number? This is the number we came up with, but there's no source of information behind that, other than we just know we have to limit it to something. So our goal was to figure out what is that number and what data supports that. That was our original mission with completing those core samples. Now that we have this recommendation of a complete reconstruction, I think that our expectations for what's going to happen there just needs to change a little bit. And since we're going to be looking at replacing that road potentially anyway, we would want to make sure that can accommodate whatever our fuel providers want to be able to do. I think that's going to be around 5,000 gallons. It's going to end up being just over 60,000 pounds with the weight of the truck and the fuel included.
So right now, we limit them to 2,000 gallons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a good thing that we're doing. It's good that we're doing that because obviously the road is not in great shape. And, you know, according to this recommendation, they probably shouldn't even be doing that. But we have to allow fuel to be moved across the airport. And I'm hoping to get some clarification soon as to what we should do in the meantime until we get this road replaced. And I do expect to get that. I know that company is very busy. They've had difficulty responding to me, so hopefully it doesn't take them too long to get that explanation.
Mr. Golden?
I want to give some historical perspective on this so you can see why we are where we're at on this particular matter. Paul, while both of us, you and I, were on the board, and this goes back a number of years, the airport had to come out of pocket, because this is not an AIP grant eligible project according to the FAA. The airport, the airport authority, had to approve reconstruction of a portion of the road that had failed. And it was done. And I don't remember the exact cost. It was significant. It was six figures. I'm going to say it was probably 5 years ago, give or take. When that was done, it was determined that the road was never built to handle any significant weight. It was really built to driveway standards, basically. And for all intents and purposes, we have never used that road for anything of any significant weight. It just failed because, well, it failed. Again, it was not built to be a road for transportation, really, to speak of. It was for light vehicles and occasionally a fuel truck. When we go over to that side of the airport, which is seldom, we use our smallest fuel truck and always have. To save the airport some money, it might be a better idea going forward to keep that in mind in the design process to limit the amount of weight. A 5,000 gallon fuel truck is gigantic. You're looking at right there, 33,000 pounds of fuel alone, with the weight of the truck probably being easily 15,000 pounds. I mean, that's an enormous amount of weight to be placing on that road. So going forward, I would suggest that if we're going to be fiscally responsible about this, limit the weight bearing capacity of that road in the first place, because it's just not used by heavy vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that's completely reasonable. And through the design portion of this project, I think we can work that out. We can say they can do an assessment of what's using the road, what it would take to build it up to that 60,000 pound capacity versus a 30,000 pound capacity, and what is that price difference?
It's going to be dramatic, and
It'll be phenomenal.
Mhm.
Do you run your snow plows on that road?
We do not run our big plow on that road.
That's good.
We use our small plow for that.
yeah, again, that road was never designed for anything like what you're talking about, and it's never been used like that. And the only reason it doesn't get used heavily, and the portion that we replaced as an airport authority was replaced because it just failed.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, since we're not having to act on this right now, it's for discussion right now to get our brains wrapping around this. I do have a written comment from John Rogers, our treasurer. He'd like to have me read into the minutes regarding this particular budget review. Per John Rogers, as in previous years, the preliminary budget, it is a collaboration between Corey and me. We have reviewed the preliminary budget line by line to generate the budget numbers presented at this meeting. The salary numbers presented include the cost of the salary increase for Corey Jenkins as requested in item H3 of today's agenda. The board will need to do a final review and approval of the preliminary budget at its March meeting. Please refer to any feedback on the budget between the February and March meetings to Corey. That's his comment for H2. Now, since we don't have to move on this, we don't have to vote on this, is there any other comment before we move on to the next item? Okay, if not, we're going to move on to item H3. For discussion and possible action, consideration for pay increases for airport manager. This will be presented by Mr. Takis.
Yeah, Steve Takis, Airport Council. You've got the memo, and we've laid out the reasons why we think Corey's, the airport manager's salary should be increased and what we're recommending it be increased to. I mean, in simple terms, we were stagnating on the airport with our prior airport manager. I mean, independent of whether you thought his performance was good or bad, we just weren't having economic development. We just didn't have hangar construction. Since Corey jumped in 2.5 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, it's taken a dramatic turn. It took a little while for him to get it going, but it's pretty clear a lot of that activity is the direct result of his efforts. Now, when I think of the airport, I think of all of us as a team, and I think all of us deserve some credit, particularly the folks that are sitting at the table with you guys. Here, when I look at the individual projects and I see the amount of communication that he has and the problem solving that he's been doing, and he does it in a way that's productive and solution oriented, I think that you have to, I came to the conclusion this is largely his the result of his efforts. So that's probably the most important reason why you should increase his salary. Secondarily, and somewhat at my request, we put together a list of comparative salaries from other airports. Now, as has been pointed out to me by several of you, the airports in the area are all really different. They all have different characteristics. I mean, right now, if you land down there at Minden, it's kind of a ghost town down there. There's like no activity. They have a airport manager that's working there who I've heard is really a good person, but she is trying to learn the trade. That's not what her training was. The other end of the spectrum you have, the far end of the spectrum, you have like Reno Tahoe, which almost isn't comparable because of the sophistication of that airport and the fact that it's, 139 commercial heavy use airport. But you've got like Reno Stead, and we've got Truckee, we've got South Lake Tahoe. We've got a variety of airports around here. And if you look at the range of salaries that we put in the memo, my information just from chatting with these people at Nevada Airport Association meetings is most of them are getting paid at the top end of those ranges. And so that's kind of where the market is. And I mention that market piece because we see it a lot in our own business, and I'm sure that you guys probably see it in your business. Periodically, you have to hire new help. And one of the things you got to do is find out, okay, what is the market out there? What kind of salary do I need to offer someone to get somebody good? And when you do that, you do this kind of research to find out what are other people paying, what's it going to cost to get somebody in here. And the secondary part of that we've run into in our business and our law firm is we find out what the market is, we find somebody's good, we offer them a reasonable salary, maybe there's some negotiation on the salary, we get them on board, and we quickly realize, oops, we just hired someone for this job at this salary. The loyal employees who've been great, who've been working for a long time, are getting paid a much lower salary. And we find that we need to right-size the salaries. Otherwise, you're either going to lose those other people or you're doing them an injustice because you acknowledge that you're paying them less than what they're worth. And so that's what we struggle with. And we've been burned because we have not been paying attention to that in our business. And we certainly don't want that to happen here. And so there is that element as well, which is it's really important to know what is the market and what should we be paying. But I have to say the primary reason that I think the strongest reason for raising his salary is his performance, which is, you know, you've evaluated it yourself, but it's been pretty darn good. And I'm available to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Steve. Before I open up the discussion, I'd like to go ahead and add into the into the record Treasurer John Rogers' comments again. I gave you guys copies of that. He asked me to read this into the discussion before you all have your chance. John Rogers says, I concur with the revenue numbers included in the chart labeled CXP lease and property tax revenues over time. I believe that the revenue increases it shows are due to Corey's excellent administrative attention to detail and customer service skills. I have no doubt that we will continue to see strong revenue growth in the future under Corey's stewardship. Thanks. That was offered by Mr. John Rogers. Now I'm opening up the floor for discussion. That we don't have any public here, so we can start with the board members. Who's first?
Mr. Chairman, I was reviewing everything in the board packet, and I created a little different metric for myself that, you know, helps me to put things in perspective. And I'm referencing the salary range sheet, I think, that Mr. Tate has prepared. Is that correct? And you'll note there are 285 based aircraft at the Carson City Airport and 86,088 annual operations, which is reflective to some extent in the number of aircraft that are based here and the dynamic nature of the airport. And so I broke it down, at least for me, looking at the average salary, the difference between the minimum and the max at some of these other airports with respect to the number of based aircraft. For example, the current airport manager salary is $93,150 divided by 285 aircraft is $327 per based aircraft. That makes sense to me because the more aircraft based at an airport, the greater the activity, the more stimulus there is for hangar development and other types of development at the airport, and is an indicator of the future potential of the airport. If we look at the proposed salary of $113,000 divided by 285, that's $396 per aircraft. By comparison, using the average salary at the Reno Stead Airport of $129,284, and I believe that salary is close to the top of that schedule right now, so it would be even more. But I use the average $129,284 divided by 188 aircraft is $688 per based aircraft. And there's really little going on at the Reno State Airport. I flew out of there for 12 years. And various developers have tried to build hangars out there, and just a bunch of empty lots that nothing has ever happened on. The Minden Tahoe Airport, the average salary would be $118,986 with 279 based aircraft. And bear in mind that many of those are non-powered aircraft gliders sitting out on the sagebrush, but they happen to be based there. That would be $426 per based aircraft at Minden. Boulder City, the average salary of $124,9 917, 252 based aircraft. That's $496 per based aircraft. And of course, here's an extreme. The South Lake Tahoe Airport, the average salary would be $122,338 at 21 based aircraft. That's $5,826 per based aircraft. So a salary of $113,000 equating to $396 per based aircraft is hardly out of line for our airport that is very dynamic. And we've got lots of stuff on the table that are, planned through the fence developments, the hangar, the new hangar that's going to be constructed on Charlie, the Ortiz brothers continuing with their expansion of their hangar development, Arrowhead Tenants, and we still have people beating our door down wanting to develop on the airport. Corey has something that is in the very early stages that may result in even more development. So I think, just in my opinion, looking at the number of operations here, 86,000 and 8, if you compare that, for example, to Reno Stead at 49,800, that's close to half. Yet that airport manager at the average salary, and I think he makes more than the average, at $688 per based aircraft. So I don't think, in my opinion, that we're out of line at all.
Thanks, Harlow. Any other comments? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I think most of us here really aren't under a salary. We kind of are entrepreneurs and running our own business, and I spent a number of my maybe 10 years in the world of salaries, and the whole problem with being in a salary is that it's hard to progress. It's hard as you learn a job. It's hard to move on. So you had two choices. When you were in a salary, you could kind of stick with the minimum raises and not necessarily be happy, or you could jump around. And jumping around is really about the only way to progress. And the problem being on salary, if you kind of stick around, you're not quite as enthused about doing a good job. So for us looking at salary increases, I think that we need to take a $50,000 or a 50,000 foot look at the different salaries. Now, and of course, we've talked about the comparables, and we can see that how this job is probably worth more money than we're paying. So I'm not going to really go over that. And when we talk about job performance, of course, we all know how critical I am on a day-to-day basis of what's going on. But what's been happening is at this airport, we have been slowly but surely gaining ground on making this airport look nice. Mowing, doing a good job of keeping the bushes around. All that has been going well. And there's another example. If you remember, I don't know, it must have been a couple of years ago, I was in here basically kind of complaining about the smoke, how our AWAS would not really do a very good job at reporting smoke levels. Well, Corey and I talked about that, and a little while later, I get a call, and Corey's put together a camera system for the FAA to help them monitor this exact smoke problem. So the point there is that we had a problem. We talked about it. FAA can't do anything about it, and Corey went out, on his own and got that whole thing going. So as far as job performance, I'm incredibly happy about how he's doing and where it's gone. So if I was just going to summarize, the steady increase in revenues, we've got buildings taking place, we can afford it. I feel the best investment we can make in this airport is in our people. So I strongly support our motion here to give Corey the raises indicated.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Who's next? Michael.
You don't have to sell me on this one. That's for certain. And, you know, Steve had stated quite well that under prior management, our activity here at the airport and our growth and development was stagnating, was the word he used. I'll use the word languishing. It's been a vast turnaround. And I also have to look at things like cost of living, inflation, things of that nature. I think the dollar amount of the sum here is very reasonable. I think the airport's getting a very good deal, and I hope that Corey will remain with us. And if it wouldn't be out of line, I would like to make a motion.
Couple more things first.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Anybody else? Curtis.
I want to say that I'm not necessarily an airport guy. I'm the new guy on the block, right? So when I take a look around at the operation, and I deal with Corey pretty regularly, and I look at what's going on out there at the airport and how we're doing business, I feel pretty good about it. But I will tell you this. We have in the city employees who are tripping over each other to get out the door, to go make more money somewhere else. We are a training ground. And I fear that that's something that we might turn into here at the airport authority. We have to be very conscious of what we pay our employees, and not just Corey, but his staff. And I think that's something we really need to take a hard look at. I personally believe this is too low. This is what I would pay my number 3 guy, not a director or a manager, for goodness sakes. But that's just my opinion. But I see it in other organizations throughout the city and other places and other cities and counties that I have connections with. And it's troubling to some degree, because what you wind up becoming is that training ground with the revolving door. And right when things get going well, when projects start booming and things are happening, that's usually when that turnover happens. And it becomes a huge stumbling block. And it is really a problem for the city overall. That's one of the reasons that they're looking at a parity study. They're trying to keep up on top of these things. You have to stay on top of salaries as they move forward. You can't just do something, then wait 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years before you do something else. It's important to stay in front of it. But I will tell you, from my perspective, it's too low.
Thank you, Curtis. Any other comments before I make a comment? Okay. What I like about this is that we have a board that has a diversified point of view. This is really healthy for the airport and for the city to have members point out different perspectives that have associated with value, and in this case, with the compensation. I just want to make a few comments. Mr. Norvell was very, very eloquent on the comparing value to operations, aircraft and things going on, which is definitely something to be considered. What wasn't mentioned is what our airport income is. If you're going to compare paying a staff, typically you compare it with what's your income. I can tell you right now that some of these airports' income is significantly more than ours because of the way they're funded with their county funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, even though operations are important, our income is a third of some of these airports that have much larger staffs, much higher paid people. So it's that part is based on and basically just percentage of labor cost to operations that wasn't actually identified in this particular conversation yet. The other thing I'm very, very, very cautious of is the old adage, we're spending other people's money. This is not coming out of our own pockets. This is coming out of our customers' pockets through their property taxes and through their all their fees. So I'm very, very conscious, and I want to be responsible that we make sure we spend our customers' money appropriately. That's very important to me. Um, that being said, I do support this initiative. I do believe that part of the reason that we are seeing a growth in revenue is not just because we're seeing some of our customers doing more development, but we're actually identifying customers that need to be charged what they have not been paying. And that is another part of the equation that is justified his staff increasing, his own income generation improvements, is because we are doing the administrative things that have not been done in the past. So when you put the whole package together, and when our treasurer says we can afford this, I'm respecting everybody's point of view here. Even though I tend to believe we probably have one of the smallest budgets of all the comparables that we're looking at as far as overall revenues. So that being said, I'm in favor of this going forward. Now, yes. Yes.
Just want to make sure here, and you know, some of you may just,
Before you do,
yes, sir.
Michael, Mr. Chairman, may I make one more
Yes.
comment?
Yes.
And that is, given Mr. Horton's comments about a training ground, we talked about the cost. What would the cost be if we were a training ground for people who are moving on rather than paying a competitive salary that is befitting of the performance of the airport manager?
And I have a response to that. My response to that as the chairman right now is that part of Mr. Jenkins' responsibility is to build a succession team. Because it is likely that there will be, over the period of his career, there'll be larger airports and other jobs that could be of much bigger responsibility that can see his performance and offer him employment. And if that ever became the case, I would not feel at all betrayed if he saw that he got the ability to go to a Class Charlie or Bravo airport and do something. So that being said, I'm hoping that we encourage to pay our airport manager very reasonable and very fair compensation. But I also expect our airport manager to have in his plans of training a succession and to start training his team so that in the event that we do have that occur to us, we have people that can either take over or at least run the ship until we find another person of proper skills and abilities. So that's something I would, as working with him all the time, I'm always going to be pushing that as part of his responsibilities to all of us, because we're committed to him. Any other comments?
I suppose I haven't said anything, so I should say something because it's important. I think just in short, just doing a little quick math, we've seen between the time Corey started and our projected revenues for next year, something in the order of a 35+% increase in revenues across both the tax base and the lease base. And I'm a big believer in rewarding results. And that's just one metric. Others have been mentioned here tonight. But, we're running a fantastic ship here. And I think that we know where a lot of that growth and improvement can be pointed towards. And it's been a real success and a joy. And I think that recognizing that is very much appropriate. And I do hope that Corey will be able to be incentivized to be energetic as he wakes up each morning and comes back to his seat at Carson City for a few years to come. But I completely agree with the chairman that one day, just knowing the talent that we have, the privilege of working with here, and the growth that he's going to accomplish, the sky's the limit if this is what Corey wants to continue to do. So let's reward him and encourage him to be with us for as long as we can keep him and keep generating those results.
Now, who wants to move? Make a motion. Yes, sir.
I'm going to rock the boat here a little bit, and I would move to approve the pay increase for Corey Jenkins to $120,000 per annum, which is $10,000 per month, effective March 1, 24. I just don't see any reason to make it just not make it an even number. Make it 120, which is 10,000 a month. That's my motion.
Discussion.
Why don't I just do that? I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion now with a second.
Debate.
No discussion? No debate?
I think it's a wise decision.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes as amended by Mr. Hutter. Okay, where are we now? Okay, we're on for airport manager's report, legal counsel's report, and treasurer. So let's start airport manager's report.
Okay, well, thank y'all very much. I really appreciate all of y'all's kind words. Okay, so some of this we've already discussed, but I'm gonna go through my list here. Echo Delta Hangar Association has completed the construction of the first hangar, and the occupants have began moving in. These are some really nice hangars. The construction of this facility is going to accommodate some really nice aircraft. There's at least one vacancy still in there, but I've no doubt that's going to be filled very quickly. And also, I find the price that hangar is listed for to be very high, which is going to be really good for property tax revenues for the airport. And it is reflective of the market. It's a huge demand for hangars out there. Carson Tahoe Executive, they have met the requirement to submit their plans for the development of the hangar along Charlie, according to the agreement to avoid default of that lease. They were not required to submit complete engineering plans by this time, but they were required to submit what their plan was, and they have completed that. They plan to build the same hangar design that Stellar just completed in Reno. I think it's about a, was it 30,000 square foot hangar?
30.
Yeah. That would be the largest hangar on the airfield. And that's just the beginning of what their plans are. We've had a little bit of back and forth about that, and we still have a little bit more to do to get that to become a reality. There'll probably be an amendment to that lease to make the site plan accommodate their plans. We believe that amendment will be fairly simple to accomplish. They are looking at all of their options, so we'll see where that goes. But as of right now, they're on schedule to be compliant with their agreement to avoid default on that lease. We've had a couple of days of snow plowing. We had a few minor maintenance issues. Both Cody and Rick did a fantastic job. I mean, whenever there's a maintenance issue that we run into, it's no big deal. They just fix it. It's incredible. We've got really good operations and maintenance staff. There was a little bit of conflict with some training during that time, but we got ahead of it by starting on the weekend. And when we went into the week with the conflict of training, it really didn't slow us down all that much. Cody completed an airport safety and operations specialist basic training course. This is one of the things that I wanted him to accomplish before he was able to work solo. Rick has worked out a schedule with Cody to begin having 7-day coverage. That will be implemented probably in about 4 weeks. And Rick and Cody came to an agreement that Rick will actually work on a Sunday so that Cody is not giving up his entire weekend. They'll be splitting the weekend between the two of them. And I made sure to address that with Rick. You know, one of the responsibilities of him being the supervisor of airport operations and maintenance is he needs to be doing project management. And so he's fully aware that if there's a task on a Thursday or Friday that has to be completed for a project, he's going to be there. Or he'll make arrangements with me to be there. So I do not believe that his decision to work on a Sunday will negatively impact his project management, because he sees that and he's fully prepared to handle that. I really admire Rick for stepping up to do that. I know giving up your weekends for any job is difficult, and but Rick cares about Cody and the future of this airport, so he stepped up to do that. So thank you, Rick, for that. Rick and Cody have completed a review of the emergency plan. Since I've been here, I put together the draft that we're currently using, and was approved, and it's been a good plan, but there's a lot of gaps. And one of those gaps is companies on call to recover aircraft. We have filled that gap, and we do have a company that is 24/7 on call, and they have the capability to move up to a Hawker jet comfortably. And they've done it before. They have some pictures of them at Carson City Airport doing that. So we know that they can do it. They're going to be included in the emergency plan as a contact for aircraft recovery. They're also able to help us with smaller projects. That's 24/7. So while Rick and I have been doing much of the recovery ourselves, we'll be able to have a professional crane operator and tow company who can provide us with their expertise to help us make this happen in a more timely manner and hopefully safer for everybody as well. Also, we've created a new checklist in the emergency that'll be included in the emergency plan. We have a checklist now, but it's more of like a call list. This new checklist is more of a formal checklist that highlights the important portions of emergency response. We've also kind of taken into consideration the emergency events that have happened over the past couple of years and included those in minor amendments throughout the emergency plan. I'll have a draft of that for board approval at the next board meeting. So we started to create a capital improvement project for signage updates. And when I first started here, it was $15,000 that we created for that. Our signs they weren't even coming close to 139 standards as far as fading and the color requirements of signage. We've improved the majority of the really bad signs already, but in our budget, we factored in signage improvements into airfield maintenance moving forward, because we should be replacing sign panels every year. They really start to fade after about 2 years, so we have a tool that we can use to measure the color codes, and we will be checking them every year and replacing them. So we've done about 6 panels this year. We've also done 2 LED retrofit kits. I want to highlight that a little bit because the reason we're able to do these LED retrofit kits is because Rick Lee is able to do the job. These signs are extraordinarily expensive, and replacing this sign entirely is very expensive. But since Rick is able to do the LED conversions for these signs, we're going to get more life out of them, and it's going to be way more affordable in the long run. And we kind of covered the permanent road capacity already, so I don't think I need to cover that any more than we have. You can see our fuel flowage numbers. This was a 97% increase over the previous year. That's a big number, but we had like no operations last year because of the winter weather conditions. So, but it's good to see a big number anyway. It's also reflected with the airport operations. I found it interesting that the airport operations increase was a 32% increase, with the fuel increase being a 97% increase. That means that we've got larger airplanes that are taking more fuel, which is good for the airport. And you can also see our ADS-B data numbers attached. We had the 1,457 arrivals and 1,483 departures. You can see the detailed chart. Also included in my manager's report, one of our capital projects was fairly small expense actually, was to purchase asphalt millings for a test area for improving the safety areas at the airport. This is a continuation of a project that was actually started before I was hired, whenever the airport had purchased the equipment to remove vegetation with herbicide application. And we stopped that direction we were going in because that would have caused erosion problems and dust hazards. So we started this test area. Well, because of our partnership with the quarry operation at the airport, we were able to get a very large amount of asphalt millings with the budget that we had set up for our test area. And we also know that getting federal funding for improvements in our safety area is going to be a challenge. So what we have done is we've started a safety area restoration project at the airport utilizing this asphalt milling materials that we acquired. We have enough materials to do the entire length of the runway, and in the board packet you can see some pictures of what we started to do. This is not a long-term solution. Hopefully we will get federal funding to do a more substantial stabilization of our safety areas. But you can see here we're able to do a fairly large stabilization just around each lighting fixture and each sign throughout the entire airport, which is going to make it to where we can actually do a herbicide application around these fixtures and make it so that we no longer have to mow in those areas. This should, as y'all are probably aware, there was a fatality in airport operations this past year due to mowing in the safety area. I don't want to see that happen. I think mowing in the safety area is really dangerous, and that's one of my biggest concerns. So improving the safety area is a really high priority for me. This project, while it's not nearly as bit large of scope as what I want to accomplish in the safety areas, it's going to make it to where the mowing operation doesn't have to get so precise around the fixtures, and the mowing operations will be long, straight passes. It's going to, just what we're doing now will drastically reduce the amount of mowing time in those safety areas. There's more to be done, but this is a really good step in the right direction. The asphalt milling installation in the RSA report here has a detailed description of what's been accomplished and what's to come, and that was prepared by Rick Lee. And we have those pictures there. That's all I've got for the manager's report.
That's it, huh? All right, thanks, Corey. Mr. Takis?
I have Steve Takis, Airport Council. I have two quick items, but I just wanted to jump back to something the airport manager was talking about. I think it's really great that we're looking at bringing in an outside vendor to do aircraft recovery. All too often, it ends up being the airport manager, his staff, the local FBOs, whether it's Mountain West or sometimes it's been Cactus. And from a liability standpoint, it would be much better to have a third party come in, let them make the arrangement with the owner of the aircraft or their insurance, whoever it's going to be, and leave us out of the middle of that transaction. We'll still be there to make sure that whatever they do doesn't harm the airport and gets it open as quickly as possible. But that's a really good improvement. Plus, it's a savings to you because you don't really want to be paying Corey and his staff to be recovering aircraft. Collecting it from the insurance companies not fun, and it's not easy, and it's not really something we're keyed to. So the two things I had for Airport Council's report is, one, on the tentative budget, it's due by April 15th, and I know that John Rogers wants to make sure that you have an opportunity to vote on it in March. I just want to let you know, you're not obligated to approve it in March. I mean, hopefully you will, because John Rogers is trying to stay ahead of the ball by doing that. But if for some reason you didn't, the law simply says the treasurer shall submit a temporary or tentative budget by April 15th. And so we've had years where it hasn't gotten to the authority and the treasurer just did what they need to do. And of course, that's just a starting point. The critical thing is the May meeting where you approve the tentative budget as the final budget, or the tentative budget modified to become the final budget. The second thing I wanted to mention is, at the request of Carson Tahoe Executive, we had a meeting with them. Well, actually, it's with their sister company, the company that owns the land on the east side of Taxiway Bravo. And to basically give us a status update on where they are on their projects that they are still looking at developing on the east side of the taxiway and through the fence. I thought it was a pretty productive meeting. They gave us some pretty creative solutions to some of the problems that we've pointed out that they need to solve before we can do anything with it. And so I think we're moving in the right direction. We're waiting now for them to send us something in the lines of a complete package, so that there's a way to just look at the whole thing and say, okay, here's what works and here's what doesn't work. The end goal being we can get it into a position where we can put it in front of you guys, so you guys can, yay or nay, or tell them where you have issues, so we can get it on track. They did mention they had sent us some drafts earlier of changes to Title 19 that they were proposed. And for the life of me, I could not find them. And I'm kind of thinking that they had told us something about them, but we had never really gotten any drafts to look at. But that was one of the things that we asked them to get us, so that we can understand what their plan is. But I just wanted to give you that status update, so you know that they are still intending to move forward with the project, and they're still working on it, I guess. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. The treasurer is not present, so we have no treasurer's report other than what he had me read to you all. Any other reports or comments from the airport authority members? Okay, if not, we have no public here for public comment. Anybody have any agenda items they'd like to ask us to include for our next meeting? None? Well, if that's the case, then this meeting is adjourned.